Missouri citizens be allowed to know if public officials are accused of alleged misconduct. Well, a bill on the governor's desk right now could shield those records from the state's open records law, blocking them from public view.
Missouri Capitol Bureau Chief Joe McLean reports on the bill, which also expands powers of the state auditor.
Under this bill, the Missouri State Auditor would be able to launch an audit or file subpoenas against any city, county, school district, or any other subdivision if he believes that there's misconduct going on. House Bill 2111 also lets local prosecutors, circuit attorneys, or law enforcement agencies request an audit from the state based on what it defines as improper government activity.
It doesn't allow us to audit anybody we can't audit now. It just allows us to do it without having to force citizens to gather signatures or wait for the governing body of the entity to invite us to do it.
Missouri Auditor Scott Fitzpatrick said there's little reason to be concerned that this expanded authority will be abused for political reasons. He says state law limits the discretion an auditor can employ.
It's an audit, and the audit has to be conducted in accordance to government auditing standards, and we can't make findings appear where they don't exist.
Dan Curry is the go-to attorney for members of the Missouri Press Association. He says this part of the bill doesn't concern him.
It's good to know there'd be more powers for the auditor to do more investigations. That's good for the state. It's good to help us find problems and solve them.
But another part of the bill does. The proposed law would exempt records related to allegations of government misconduct from the state's Sunshine Law. That's the law that obligates governments to release information to the public, with exceptions to protect certain identities or preserve investigations.
I think we should always pause and look really hard before we decide to close any more records at any time.
MU Professor of Journalism and Free Press Studies Chair Kathy Kiley agrees.
I worry that when this very broad language is being added to the law, that it might result in some unintended consequences.
Fitzpatrick said the new exemption is to better protect whistleblowers from retaliation. Governor Parsons' office hasn't indicated any plans about the bill's signing or veto. In Jefferson City, Joe McLean, WGEM News.